Hey guys! How are all of you beautiful people doing? I hope you all are having a great day. And yes, this is the next part of I Became Shikamaru Nara, where the world that once seemed fictional is now real. Shinobi, chakra. It's all so close. After being reborn in the body of a deceased child, the hero has a second chance to live this life anew. Having found a new home and clan, he will have a long and difficult journey. But the object that was found in the past and changed his fate is still with him. Now, with this power, he will follow the path of the strongest Shinobi. So without any delay, let's start the series. Okay, you quickly memorized the seals, that's good. In the future, this will definitely come in handy. Now I will explain the simple rules of our clan ninjutsu. I will not teach you transformation and control, you will go through all this in the academy. Then we will begin to study the serious techniques of the clan. And now you don't need it, it will be much easier for you to use our family techniques. ****. Rat. With just one seal, the shadow beneath the man trembled and quickly began to lengthen, reaching Shikamaru in a matter of seconds. But the young man did not move, he wanted to see the effect of the technique. When he finished, Shikaku chuckled. Well, the main thing is that you must understand that the whole point is in the chakra. Since you are my son, it will not really be difficult for you. You can say you were already born with this knowledge. Your chakra is already adapted to influence the shadows. This is why our clan's Haijutsu are quite difficult for other Shinobi to master. It's all about how we need chakra and use yin in the right proportion with physical energy. Therefore, our chakra is slightly different from the ordinary chakra. For others, it is difficult to repeat this, but certainly not impossible. Opening his hand, the shadow gradually began to return back to Shikaku, and Shikamaru twisted his hands in surprise. Breaking free from shadow control was memorable. Now the guy was in very happy feelings. It was the first ninjutsu, the first jutsu he saw when he got into this world, and it worked. It really tied him up. Although this is not a super technique, but, after all, this is real ninjutsu. Smiling broadly, Shikamaru asked his father. How can I do it? Just use chakra, you'll do it instinctively. This is a legacy from our ancestors, it is in your blood. And what stamps? The ones that I showed you at the beginning. You don't have enough experience yet, so you should give more detailed signs for the technique. Nodding, Shikamaru began folding seals and trying to concentrate on his chakra. He had never done it before, so he was in awe. 1 try, 2, 3, on the 5th try, Shikamaru grinned wryly and asked. Father, how to direct the chakra? Shikaku asked in surprise. What, you can't channel chakra? Yeah. Slapping his forehead, the man said. Now I understand, you forgot everything. Okay, come here, I'll teach you simple concentration. This is the base that everyone learns. It will help you learn to feel the chakra and guide it correctly, especially for ninjutsu, from your tanketsu. This is the easiest way to feel the chakra and learn how to guide it. Shikamaru quickly approached his father and began to watch him with interest. Shikaku sat down on the ground, took a small piece of paper and closed his eyes. At the same instant, the sheet moved from its place. Here, try, handing the sheet to his son, the man looked at him expectantly. Shikamaru quickly sat down next to him and did the same. Only the leaf on his hand did not move at all. Glancing at him in annoyance, Shikamaru continued to patiently try. Ha ha, don't strain yourself like that, just concentrate on your body, try to draw out the inner strength from it. When done, you can feel a slight movement inside the body, this will be the chakra. Nodding briefly at his father's words, Shikamaru continued to concentrate. This time, he followed his advice and tried to channel the power into the leaf. At first nothing worked, but then, an unusual movement began in the guy's body. Although Shikamaru was pleased, he continued the process. Now he no longer wanted to move the leaf, but wanted to feel all the chakra channels, try to drive all the chakra through them and feel each channel. In the past, he only felt the chakra, but never felt it so clearly. Wow, the feeling of the chakra was amazing. Shikamaru felt as if he had discovered something unknown, something that was always with him, but he could not control it. The feeling was amazing. Then, the guy finally returned to the sheet and with just one movement, easily activated it. It was actually not difficult, several of the points of the tanketsu were right in the palm of your hand, so it was not difficult at all to act on the leaf. I can't believe I couldn't have done this before, it's so easy. Noticing his son's smile, Shikaku nodded. You see, this is just nonsense. This is what all shinobi go through, the basis of the basics so to speak. Well, now, go and use the shadow binding. Nodding to his father, Shikamaru got up and walked a little further, and then began to fold seals, concentrating chakra in the tanketsu and slowly directing it into the shadow. The chakra gave in easily and having folded the last seal, Shikamaru was surprised to notice that he could control his shadow by directing the chakra. Wow! Noticing his son's smile, Shikaku smiled himself. Well done! On the first try, very well, I knew you had. Millimeter. When Shikamaru's shadow twitched, Shikaku did not even understand what had happened, as he was instantly immobilized. Shikamaru's shadow was so fast it was almost impossible to keep track of it. Shikamaru himself didn't quite understand how it happened, but he felt like controlling the shadow was completely easy. Plus, she was so quick at following his commands that it was amazing. Her speed was not at all slow like in the manga. Shikaku looked at his son in amazement and said, "Call back the shadow." Shikamaru nodded and removed the shadow. But this time, Shikaku looked at her clearly, and noticing her movement faster, he exclaimed in amazement. Incredible! How did you do it? Even for him, an experienced jounin, it would be difficult to dodge such a fast shadow and not be caught. Shikamaru opened his arms and shrugged. I don't know, I just sent it and that's it. Just directed. Yes, well said. You should know Shikamaru, although our shadows are controlled by chakra, but not ideally. If they were perfectly controlled by us, and we could get up to something like this. Think about what you can do if your shadow has such a terrifying capture rate. Shikamaru, of course, clearly understood that his shadow was unusual. But for him, this was not surprising, nevertheless he strengthened his pedigree, so this should be in the order of things. Of course, he could not reveal such a thing. Shikamaru nodded briefly. I understand, but why then it happened? I don't know, Shikaku said, shaking his head thoughtfully, maybe it's what happened. Don't worry, father, isn't that for the best? Shikamaru asked with a smile. Shikaku chuckled wryly and nodded. Looks like that. If all your shadows are like that, then you are undoubtedly the genius of the clan. I have not even heard that there were similar ones. With this ability, you will go far, I'm sure. At that moment, the back door of the house was parted, a disgruntled woman came out on the threshold and shouted. Hey, you! How many more should I call you? Eat lively. Yes. Shikaku quickly nodded and walked home. Yoshino turned her angry eyes to her son. But he did not attach any importance to this and followed his father. Powerful women were a little annoying for Shikamaru. He usually always took control, so it was not easy to get used to this. But since she is his mother, there is nothing to be done. All he could do was look at his father with regret. Dad, you got a heavy share. Getting up early in the morning, Shikamaru quickly washed up, brushed his teeth and headed to the kitchen. At the same time, Yoshino was still making breakfast. When Shikamaru entered the kitchen, the woman froze in surprise. After taking a good look at the energetic-looking son, the woman could not believe her eyes. She was the first to see him like this. Although Shikamaru is still a child, he, like his father, was not very active. He always liked to sleep a little longer, and to get up so early. This is generally the first such case. Son, are you all right? The woman asked worriedly. Even at their first meeting, after his awakening, she noticed a strange thing in her son. Somewhere in her soul she felt that he had changed. Even his gaze is no longer that childish, but like the gaze of an adult-formed man. Of course, she, like many in the Nara clan, is used to this. All the Shinobi in their family grew up earlier than even many other ninja, but not at the same age. It was very strange, and after telling Shikaku about his changes, the woman became even more convinced that the current Shikamaru is not the same as before. There was no longer the old lazy look, but rather shining eyes, wanting to know everything in the world. Has he finally begun to mature? Maybe at least he will not be such a lazy mediocrity as his father. Smiling at her son, Yoshino asked. How did you sleep? Great Mom, can I eat? Of course, sit down, we have miso today. Shikamaru nodded curtly and settled down on the zabuton, surveying the kitchen along the way. She, like the rest of the Nara house, was quite spacious. The smell of fresh vegetables and soup pleasantly awakened the appetite. Shikamaru had many plans today: learn about the clan, visit Konoha, scout the situation. As he already understood, their clan is different from the same Uchiha or Hyuga. The hierarchy was probably different here too. This was all quite interesting, so while he waited, he decided to ask. Listen, Mom, can you tell me about the clan? Yoshino served a plate to her son and sat down opposite. And what do you want to know? Well, how everything works here, what can the head of the clan and everything else? Yoshino smiled. Wow, you are interested in the clan, this is a commendable young man. Well, since you are asking so, I will try to explain. Making herself comfortable, Yoshino began her story. Our clan is not that big by the standards of other clans. But 100 people should be recruited. There are not so many jonins among them, mostly knins. The part is responsible for the collection of medicinal ingredients and for our research center. So there are many Ioronins and explorers among the clan. In this we are just like Yamanaka and Akimichi. In fact, we always work together, and the affairs of our clan are not very different. All three of us, of course, have fighting shinobi. These are often the heads of the clan and all its descendants, elders and their descendants. They also have their own work, which you will learn about later. Hearing about the elders, Shikamaru asked with interest. Do we have elders? Of course, we're a big family. It's just that Shikaku was from the main branch, and I, for example, from the side branch and was the daughter of one of the elder. Your grandfather Yoshado died in the war, as did your two uncles. So the title of elder passed to me. Therefore, like your father, I have a lot of work." With a sad sigh, Yoshina was silent for a moment. Shikamaru smiled calmly and said, "They were heroes. I am glad that I have such relatives." Hearing her son's words, the woman smiled warmly and ruffled his hair a little. "I am glad that I have such a son. In fact, your second grandfather, Shikaku's father, also died in the war. Usually, in wartime, our clan performs special tasks to capture, and in the Third World War, there were many of them. Perhaps you will find out about this later." "Well, what about the clan?" "In total, we have 5 elders, and all the rest are just ordinary members of the clan." "That's all?" "Well, if it is talking about hierarchy or rules, then everything is simple. The elders control certain industries and then report to the head of the clan. The head, in turn, reports to the Hokage. Well, our internal affairs are not as complicated as those of the same Uchiha or Hyuga. Simple rules based on seniority and respect." Then Yoshino began a story about the internal structure and some rules. Basically, the entire Nara clan system was like one big company. Where were the elders, and after them other elders and ultimately the head of the clan. The structure was straightforward, and the rules were fair enough. The Shinobi was even completely free to leave the clan. After all, the Nara techniques were not only not particularly in demand, but someone else would not be able to use them either, but rather it would be too difficult. Over the years, the ability to manipulate shadows seemed to merge into our DNA, so we were adapted to it. It was already like hair or eye color inherent in certain ethnic groups. Shikamaru, as the son of the head of the clan, had a good position, but he certainly was not here a prince capable of giving orders. Simply put, the Nara clan is one small organization working for one big organization, Konoha. Yoshino also talked about her relationship with Akimichi and Yamanaka, but she skimmed it, emphasizing that Shikamaru is too early to know about it. But she also made it clear that the two clans are close allies and colleagues. Very often, members of 3 clans marry each other. But in principle, no one forbids anyone to choose a pair of ordinary people or other shinobi. Any clear purity of blood is not observed here. This is exactly what distinguishes these clans from the same Hyuga or Uchiha. After listening to his mom and finishing breakfast, Shikamaru thanked her and went to work out. He still hadn't studied the Master Scroll of Taijutsu, so he should have taken the time. Well, and only then you can do business outside of your home. Very soon, Shikamaru was planning to get the first genome. But first, it was worth exploring Konoha and Shinobi history in general. Yet from anime and manga, he had limited knowledge. Although I watched everything I could, from movies to Boruto. As such, there was not much information about the world and politics. Although, already from this, it was possible to draw some conclusions. Especially about the horribly disastrous policy of the hidden villages. It was not a bad idea to simply build up strength, and as a last resort, it was possible to leave the village altogether. It's just that if you don't know the world in which you live, you can either miss something or get something unpleasant. And leaving the hidden leaf can be problematic. Still, some tasks were related specifically to the village, although there were not very many of them. But Shikamaru didn't want to lose them either. So leaving was a last resort. Putting his thoughts of politics aside, Shikamaru finally arrived in the woods behind the house. I wanted to inspect the possessions of the clan, but now it will wait. Concentrating on the distant deer, Shikamaru tried to fold just one seal. Rat. At the same moment, his chakra merged into the shadow and established instant control. The shadow immediately overtook the deer. He froze and stood motionless. Even with one seal it turned out amazing. Already slightly delighted, Shikamaru tried to make the deer move. At first everything worked out almost perfect, but after almost a full minute of training, he felt a slight weakness and some weakening of the chakra. Realizing that he was close to the limit, Shikamaru quickly dispelled the technique. Yet he was still a simple child, even though he had a huge predisposition for the yin and hidden of the clan, he still had little chakra. Although the technique turned out with only one seal, this should not be attributed to some kind of great luck, it was just all about the pedigree. Typically, seals could be cut fairly quickly, with just a couple of months of training. But since Shikamaru's bloodline was so strong, it was much easier. He didn't even have to develop control much. So now, in principle, he could well begin to study at least all clan techniques. Of course he cannot just use them. When he finished his technique, Shikamaru smiled. Well, the first secret technique has been studied, 9 more, and you can get a reward for the task. This task was simple, it was from the general list of technical tasks. Learn 10 ninjutsu, genjutsu, taijutsu, and of course the secret techniques. But the difference was that the secret techniques, although they could be the same nin, tai and gen, did not count towards other tasks. They were only valid for one secret technician. So to complete 2 tasks at once will not work out and thus cheat. Looking around, Shikamaru chuckled. Well, the chakra is still there, it's time to check the taijutsu scroll. Stop gathering dust in my head. In fact, the scroll was not that special. They were simple movements, a list of exercises, and a few fighting techniques. All the rest of the information was devoted to proper nutrition, the creation of several useful decoctions and healing pills for recovery. Of course, they were all of poor quality. After all, the scroll was more suitable for ordinary people or just starting their way to taijutsu. Someone more experienced probably trains with a more advanced training system. But Shikamaru wanted to practice in it. He still had no alternative, and he didn't really want to buy something in the system. At the hospital, Shikamaru had already tested basic exercises like push-ups, squats, but he hadn't tested fighting techniques. In addition, Shikamaru planned to learn the style of his clan, but it turned out that this style is almost exactly the same. Most of the Leaf Village practiced the same leaf style. Only a few clans like the Uchiha or the Hyuga had their own style. But this is understandable, they still had a special advantage that ordinary taijutsu could not reveal. Although, maybe there were other ninjas in the village, like the same Might Guy, who had a different style. But such training was not suitable for everyone. So Shikamaru decided to rely on the system and learn the basic style from there. In any case, it was only for the first time. In the future, he wanted to learn from experienced ninjas in taijutsu and only then draw up his own training program. Well, in the future, you can come up with your own style, when you have experience and knowledge. Shikamaru didn't start by sharpening punches right away, he started stretching and warming up his whole body. After that, he got into a rack. Recalling some of the techniques from the scroll, Shikamaru took the correct position and began to clearly beat his fists into the air. It was a classic exercise in martial arts. Both fists at the waist, then a blow, right, and then left. Asterisk ha. Asterisk asterisk ha. Asterisk asterisk ha. Asterisk. After practicing the punches, Shikamaru proceeded to his feet. Having understood the technique, he started practicing strikes on a tree. In the future, he will definitely need a sparring partner, but at 4 years old, that's enough. In addition, he retained skills from the past world, and he was good at hand-to-hand combat. Unfortunately, in this world, this will only work against ordinary people or children like himself. After spending 2 hours practicing strikes, he ran a couple of kilometers in the woods and returned home. After rinsing in the shower and changing into simple clothes, black breeches and a t-shirt of the same color, Shikamaru looked in the mirror and nodded in satisfaction. He didn't really like his hair, but for now it will do. After finishing his clothes, Shikamaru returned to the kitchen and had lunch. Mother and father had already gone about their business, so he was free to do whatever he wanted. Noticing a simple note on the refrigerator with the words, "Food is in the fridge, don't walk for a long time, we'll be in the evening. Mother." Smiling, Shikamaru turned and walked to the exit. Unfortunately, no money was left for him. Maybe kids his age are not supposed to, Shikamaru vaguely understood the rules. But that didn't bother him. He had some ryos left from his last walk, and if more are needed, he can easily get them. Buttoning his sandals, Shikamaru closed the front door and left. The Nara area consisted of about a couple of dozen houses and several large buildings. There were also training grounds, shops, eateries. The houses were mostly located on the edge of the forest. To begin with, Shikamaru wanted to explore the area, and then head to the city center and fully explore Konoha. He didn't spend much time looking around the entire block. He wanted to memorize the main buildings, just in case. So a detour was necessary. Having finished here, he went to inspect the village. It took more time this time. He walked through the main buildings. Visited the famous belt Ishiraku, which was not yet so famous. I ate a couple of portions of ramen and moved on. Hokage Rock, residence, Konoha police. He examined everything and memorized. He even wanted to go up the Hokage Rock and see what was there. But, unfortunately, access was denied there. So he turned around and walked away. Next in line was the Hokage Mansion, the Neckar River, the library, and of course a huge cemetery. After finishing here, he went to other areas. He did not go to the territory of other clans. I just remembered well where they were located and went on. He visited the Ninja Academy, watched the children practice, then went to the training grounds. There he watched young Shinobi train with their mentors and memorized a couple of techniques. Most of the Konoha ninja had a similar style of dress. A dark shirt with swirl patterns on the shoulders, a green jacket with a similar pattern on the back. Some of the ninja bandaged their legs, while others did without it. Although, among them, of course, there were outstanding guys wearing bright colors. At the end of his walk, Shikamaru visited the memorial to the fallen heroes of the village. It was a landmark place, with hundreds of names of fallen leaf ninja. There were also the familiar names of the Nara clan. Many Uchiha surnames, including even Obito Uchiha. The list was huge. Seeing him, Shikamaru could only shake his head and smile wryly. What Hashirama changed was he brought clan wars to the world level. Although the anime was interesting, living in the world of Shinobi was much more dangerous than in the past world of Shikamaru. Even as a thief and a criminal, death in his memory was not a frequent occurrence. Although, there were of course exceptions. After finishing his tour of the village, Shikamaru breathed fresh air and headed back home with a smile. Even though he did not really like the structure of the village, he was still too small to worry about it again. To begin with, You should study everything properly, especially history. But, since it was evening, it was worth returning home. The very next day he wanted to visit the library, and at the same time study the chakra. He had already finished with the village. It was quite large and consisted of a couple of dozen or more clans. It was difficult to say the exact number, but there were definitely a lot of them. Still, in the anime, only a part was shown, and the rest were not even mentioned. There were quite a few of the same bloodlines in the system, and some were from the Lister village, which Shikamaru had not even heard of. But the village was still not as big as in Boruto, so it was quite possible to get around it in a few hours. As for the territories of other clans, it doesn't matter. The same was true of Root, although there were no hints of him, but he was definitely in the village. It was of course not easy to find such a secretive organization. Yes, and Shikamaru did not look. He now does not need anything like that. Such knowledge can only get worse. The main places he visited was the place of Shisui's future death right outside the village, far beyond the territory of the Uchiha clan. Another important place was Naruto's house. Yet in such a large city it was not easy to find him. But remembering what the building looked like, it was no longer so difficult. But even after finding this house, Shikamaru still did not meet the famous Jinchuriki. Yes, he was not going to, but just wanted to know where he lives, and that's it. After all, a famous place, it could be useful to know this. Konoha was very lively. Dozens of people walked around the city and lived their own lives. Beauty. Especially in the evening, when the day was drawing to a close, Konoha was warmer than ever. Walking through the narrow streets, Shikamaru could not help smiling. This atmosphere was completely different from his past world. Now he had a completely different path. Back home, Shikamaru met with his mother and they had dinner together. Just as they were finishing, Shikaku returned and received another scolding from his wife for being late. Shikamaru could only chuckle and head into the room. He did not want to participate in the next showdown. The day was hard, so as soon as he lay down, he immediately fell asleep. The morning was standard: wash up, have breakfast, exercise. Running an additional half a kilometer this time, Shikamaru began to think about medicinal herbs, or rather, vitamins for recovery. After yesterday's day, his legs and whole body ached quite a bit, so he began to understand the whole meaning of medicinal plants and decoctions from the scroll. After all, training requires special nutrition, and in the Shinobi world, you can even use different herbs and pills for this, with much greater efficiency. So besides the library, he also wanted to visit the herb shop in the Akimichi area. Therefore, having washed and gathered, Shikamaru immediately went shopping, simultaneously snatching a couple of wallets from inattentive residents. Fortunately, they can be distinguished from the Shinobi, even their gait or hands were different. Yet training, one way or another, leaves its marks on people, which an experienced thief, of course, must notice and adapt. The problem was that sometimes the situations were different and you had to rely on your gut. Sometimes some women had completely delicate skin on their hands, but at the same time, they caused a sense of danger. In such situations, Shikamaru tried to stay away. Still, no matter how experienced he was, it was not an easy task to discern an experienced killer in a crowd, even if they did not try to hide. Probably those whom he noticed were simply genin or insufficiently experienced knin. A professional jonin certainly cannot be calculated with such nonsense. Moreover, the sooner he will figure out you and stick a kunai in your heart. Even the wrong look could be expensive. So in such situations, you had to trust your instinct. One of the thief's most important rules is to listen to your instincts. But even if it was easy to steal at first, Shikamaru knew he couldn't last that long. He lived in a hidden village full of ninjas. As soon as they want to find a thief, it won't be too difficult. He did not overestimate his capabilities. So it was worth finding another way to make money. Therefore, going for herbs, Shikamaru pondered a new way to earn extra money. It was quite possible to crank some grey scheme. Well, if he had a chance to visit the Akimichi area, then he did not mind talking to Kji. He really liked this guy, and his strong body will be very useful for sparring and training. All that remains is to persuade him. Apparently, Shikamaru and Kji knew each other in the past, so things will be even easier. Walking along the road and counting the stolen money, Shikamaru thought with a cheerful smile. Not bad, it should definitely be enough for the first time. When I become a ninja, everything will be easier. Now we need to solve this problem. Stopping at a small shop with the Akimichi clan symbol, Shikamaru opened the door and entered. Inside, the shop was rather small, but cozy. By the walls there were showcases and shelves with various herbs and jars with roots, flowers and other plants soaked in them. The showcases contained pills, bottles of potions, and even a few paper stamps. Without looking at the merchandise, Shikamaru walked over to the large, dark-haired woman and handed the list over with the words, "Now, do you have any of this?" The woman accepted the sheet and glanced over the list with her eyes. "Of course, this is the most popular product, now I will bring everything." 10 minutes later, the woman brought out several small jars of herbs. Then, she detached several and pulled out. After collecting about 5 kinds of herbs, she rolled them up and handed them to Shikamaru. "Dilute in hot water, but this." Thrusting her hand under the counter, she took out a small package. Passing it to Shikamaru, the woman added, "This is already prepared ointment, smear them on wounds and abrasions." Shikamaru accepted everything and left immediately after paying. The broth he bought helped a quick recovery from workouts, and the ointment could help solve the problem of wounds in training. Still, it is very common to injure fists or legs while honing punches. This ointment was very useful, especially for those who have barely embarked on the ninja path. In the system, Shikamaru could buy something similar, but the pills that were sold there were of fairly high quality and were better taken by an already experienced shinobi. They helped not only to quickly restore the body, but also helped to restore chakra. The price of the pills was low, but Shikamaru did not want to waste even 1 point, so there were enough herbs. After finishing here and putting everything in his hip pocket, he headed to CHG's house. Yesterday he already found out where the head of the Akimichi clan lived, so the path was much easier now. In the past, when Shikamaru watched anime and read manga, Kji Akimichi always seemed like a normal guy to him, just like Shikamaru. It's just that Akimichi didn't develop much in terms of strength, like his friend. Knowing that CHG and Anew would become his partners in the future, Shikamaru wanted to change the fat man a little. For a start, as soon as he got used to training, even if it was difficult, Shikamaru could not refuse it. It is likely that in the future Shikamaru will rapidly increase in strength, so the original Ino Shikache may not last long. But at least even if Shikamaru becomes Knin or Jnin, he may well stay with his team, simply by becoming their captain. So in this case, it was worth raising their skills a little or they will be useless. Even if they weren't a team and Shikamaru quickly grew in strength, he would at least be able to have strong allies if he trained them. Teamwork was of course unusual for him, but in the ninja world it can become a necessity. Although, he still hoped to increase his strength to a level where he could handle it alone. So it's worth starting with Kji, and since this fat man loves to eat, Shikamaru decided to please him by buying a couple of packets of chips. The food was a good incentive, so maybe he could be forced to exercise the same way. Arriving at the rather large residence, Shikamaru immediately walked to the door and knocked. But there was no answer. After knocking about 10 more times, the guy shook his head and began to leave. But just at that moment, the door opened, and a small plump guy with a sleepy face and disheveled hair looked out. Kji was hard not to recognize, so Shikamaru smiled and said hello. Hi Kji. The guy rubbed his sleepy eyes and stretched out in surprise. Shikamaru. The fat man blinked a little, and then exclaimed, Shikamaru. Ha ha, good to see you. Kji ran up to his friend and immediately began hugging him. Father said not to bother you, but it looks like you're okay now, right? Shikamaru smiled, and gently pushing the fat man away said. Yes, I'm fine, but if you hug like that, it will get worse. Kji Akimichi was slightly shorter than Shikamaru, and was noticeably thicker. He was not quite fat, rather a little plump and with a rather large skeleton. Even his arms were noticeably larger than those of the thin Shikamaru. Kji was definitely predisposed to become a huge mountain of muscles. But since he was a Kimichi, a member of the clan specializing in burning calories for the use of techniques, this was not a particularly good option. Although, if he was building both muscle and fat, then it would probably be even better. Otherwise, Kji looked the same as in the anime as a child. Dark brown hair, a plump face and distinctive Akimichi clan patterns on both cheeks. Shikamaru, on the other hand, looked slightly more distinctive than his version in the manga. His clothes were darker, and his gaze no longer expressed a lazy state. In fact, Shikamaru and Kji met only recently. Since Kji was often teased by other children, his father decided to introduce him to his friend's son, and that's how they became friends. When Shikamaru pushed Kji away slightly, the fat man smiled apologetically. Sorry. Just at that moment, the guy noticed something in his friend's hands and his eyes immediately sparkled. Ha! Is it chips? Yes, it's for you. Shikamaru smiled and handed 2 packs of Kji. The boy grabbed the packs and smiled. Thanks buddy. Come on, I'll give you a cake. With a wave of his hand, Kji entered the house and took off his shoes. Shikamaru didn't mind and followed him. A few minutes later, 2 were already sitting at the table drinking tea. Looking around his friend's rather large kitchen, Shikamaru smiled. And it's cozy here? Well, yes, my father loves to cook in his free time. Akimichi's kitchen was really special, with at least a couple of refrigerators. Several dozen pots, pans and other kitchen utensils. It was like the kitchen of a man obsessed with cooking and food. Yeah, this is definitely Akimichi's style. Shikamaru smiled internally, broke off a piece of cake and ate it with pleasure. The taste was really amazing. But Shikamaru didn't come here for food, so he put down his mug of tea and asked. Kji's case, you want to be a ninja, right? Well, yes, sort of like. The fat man answered without much enthusiasm. Shikamaru just grinned wryly and said. I'm planning to become a ninja and hoped that we could train together. Do you think I can become a ninja? Kji asked doubtfully. The fat man clearly lacked confidence, which was conspicuous, but this did not bother Shikamaru at all. Confidence is quite possible to cultivate in yourself, it was not a problem. Shikamaru nodded. Of course, I have some technique, with it you will definitely become not just a ninja, but a very strong ninja. Kji's face changed and asked excitedly. Technique? What kind of technique? Tell me. After drinking his tea, Shikamaru smiled calmly. Calm down, everything has its time, buddy. First, we need to get some money. Mom refused me this, and my father. He lives by the laws of his mother, so I was left without money. Maybe you have something. When asked by a friend, Kji only nodded. I have, a little. Standing up, Kji ran off somewhere, and 5 minutes later returned with a small wallet. He poured some coins on the table and smiled. That's all there is. After counting all the coins by eye, Shikamaru just shook his head in disappointment. This amount was definitely not enough. Of course, at his age, you shouldn't have to worry about money at all. If he asked his parents, they could very well give him a little. But Shikamaru was not a child, and it was a little unpleasant for him to ask someone for money. Moreover, even in the past, he always got out of financial problems on his own. His father was so Shikamaru got out of the problems himself. And he could not once again involve others, especially parents, in his training. He did not doubt their reliability, they just did not need to know some things, because they could start asking questions. With Kji, it could have been easier. First, Shikamaru did not doubt his loyalty, as he knew a lot about him. Second, it was easy to get him to keep secrets and not ask unnecessary questions. So having a partner in crime, even though he was so small, was not a bad idea. It is not always possible to solve everything on your own, and an ally can help in many ways. Money was a problem. Now Mom had given Shikamaru only 50 ryos, which would only have been enough for a few servings of ramen. This was very frustrating, especially for someone who had no money problems in the past. Now he felt like some kind of schoolboy putting aside a penny. This annoyed him terribly. Now, by training with Kji, purchases will double. Genin probably could have provided for himself, but both children were only 4 years old, they were completely dependent on their parents. This, already an adult in the body of a child, was not particularly pleasing, so Shikamaru wanted by all means to get money for his needs. Of course, there was no hope for Kji at all. He may have been a little smarter than a 4-year-old, but not much. There is a long way to learn. So pushing aside a few coins, Shikamaru said, this will not be enough. Some of the pills require expensive herbs to craft, so we'll need more. Shikamaru planned to repeat a couple more drugs from the scroll and get to grips with the study of the pills of this world. The system gave him a lot of inspiration, so the medical field was very interesting to him. Having received the first pill, he immediately had many ideas. What if they can be repeated? Such a question should have been examined. In addition, Shikamaru was from the Nara clan, and he could well have the opportunity to see special medicines from the family's healing books. It was also quite interesting knowledge. After all, learning only one technique and just increasing strength is too small a goal. Shikamaru wanted to take a broader path. This world was so huge and interesting, he was drawn to explore everything. Well, for the study you need resources for which you need money. Fuinjutsu also had an interesting section, so the money was definitely needed. Well, and how to earn them, he already had several ideas. Kji was not that important in this case, just his friend could learn from this, which was quite useful. And his loyalty should increase. Seeing his childish behavior, Shikamaru was a little annoyed. But unfortunately he could not do anything, he was a child himself, so it was temporarily worth it. Getting up from the table, Shikamaru waved his hand. "Come on, I have an idea." "What is this idea?" Kji asked interestedly. "You will soon find out." When the two left the house, Shikamaru looked around and calmly asked. "I remember that someone called you fat, right?" Well, yeah." Kji lowered his head slightly, but Shikamaru patted him on the shoulder. "Don't worry, they'll get there soon. Besides, they can be useful to us. Come in handy." Shikamaru chuckled. "Exactly, now lead them where they usually go." "Well. Okay, let's go." Kji looked at Shikamaru oddly, but guided him anyway, starting to quickly eat chips. At the guy's nervousness, Shikamaru just smiled. He wasn't particularly worried about the fat man's past. Shikamaru was not one of those who got into other people's problems and arranged vengeful fights. Plus, they were just children. Now he was more interested in money, which these jerks could easily get with their innocent faces. Taking control of the bunch of suckers was much easier and safer than robbing the villagers. Much more reliable if the residents themselves give money. Chuckling a little, Shikamaru stopped at one of the shops and motioned to stop Kji. "Wait, you need to buy props." "Require what?" To a friend's question, Shikamaru just waved his hand and went into the store. Coming out of there a couple of minutes later with a small package, he nodded. "Come on, you'll see everything soon." "Well, okay." Accepting the package, Kji nodded and followed his friend. A few minutes later, Kji led Shikamaru to a small clearing. There were several children of different ages in this glade. 4 to 6, maybe even 8. All of them took turns throwing stones at the target, some hit, but most missed. They looked like simple petty street punks. Shikamaru had no particular desire to beat up such little monsters, but now it was necessary. Turning to the depressed Kji, Shikamaru calmly said, "Remember buddy, there is a simple rule. If you want to get someone to do the dirty work, you have to either give something of value or make you afraid of losing something. Pain is a good incentive, but sometimes it's not enough. The best option is both. In our case, we use just this option. Fear first, then motivation." Patting Kji on the shoulder, Shikamaru chuckled. "Be here and watch, it will come in handy for you." Having said this, Shikamaru thrust his hands into his pockets and walked slowly towards the 10 boys. Among them there should definitely be those who attended the academy. But Shikamaru was not particularly worried. His physical indicators, thanks to the pills and the elixir, reached almost genin levels. Of course, the indicators were one thing, but the skills and jutsu were another. Even if he reaches the required indicators, it will be impossible to defeat the genin. But, in front of him are not genins, but just petty punks. As Shikamaru came closer, he calmly scanned the crowd and asked with a grin. "Who is in charge here?" "Chief." The children began to look at each other, but then a rather large and tall guy came out. He looked like the oldest. Hitting himself in the chest, he said loudly, "I'm in charge here." Looking at Shikamaru with narrowed eyes and noticing Kji in the distance, the guy grinned. "If you want to play with us, then you're too fat without that." Everyone looked at Akimichi and began to chuckle quietly. Shikamaru didn't even need to see to understand Kji's current state. But, he was not particularly emotional because of this. He came here not for revenge and not for heroism, but for labor. But there was no point in chatting anymore, so he went up to the heftiest guy and hit him with a swing. Asterisk bang. Asterisk. quicker. The guy did not expect this at all, and bent over like a match, falling to his knees and greedily gasping for air. All the punks immediately stopped laughing and stared blankly at Shikamaru. The same one just smiled hard and said, "Now I'm in charge, are there any objections?" The children began to look at each other, and at some point, one of the older ones shouted, "Don! Oh, you little! Get him, guys!" At the same moment, 3 older children rushed to the calmly smiling Shikamaru. Such a reaction was expected, so he only grinned and stretched out his hand, easily intercepted the first. Throwing it over his shoulder, he dodged the second and, having performed a sweep, knocked down the third. As soon as the 2 were on the ground, Shikamaru lunged forward and delivered a couple of blows to the nose of the last one remaining. "Ah!" Clutching his broken face, the boy screamed. Shikamaru wasted no time, and kicked him to the ground. 2 of them had already started to get up, but a few good blows quickly diffused them. At the same time, while the trio lay and groaned, all the small people watched the fight with passion, and the first of the defeated finally caught his breath and began to slowly rise. If he knew that one should not gulp the air greedily, but rather exhale, then he could recover earlier. So now, when he was ready to fight, it was already too late. Unknown in these places, the fighting style was first demonstrated by a small child, almost 2 times his age. As soon as he was ready to rush to Shikamaru, the guy immediately froze motionless. Standing away from the immobilized boy, Shikamaru could only smile at the crowd's reaction. Holding his hand in front of him, he asked with a grin, "Are you ready to recognize me as your boss?" The guy just stood still and could not move. Attentive people have already noticed that something is wrong here. A long shadow stretched from Shikamaru's feet to the immobilized boy. The guy did not even understand what was happening and why he could not move, so he panicked a little. What did you do? Is this the first time you've seen ninjutsu?" Grimacing derisively, Shikamaru snorted. "If you weaklings want to learn something, then I advise you to accept me as your boss, and then maybe I'll teach you techniques." The guy tried to move, but when nothing came of it, he shouted, "Let me go. Let go or I'll tell my father." "Shut up, even if your father is the Hokage himself, he's not here right now, right? And here you are, and if you piss me off, my shadow technique will break a couple of your fingers. Maybe you want to check." The trapped man finally began to understand his situation. No, stop. I get it. But seeing Shikamaru's cold expression, tears started to flow from the guy's eyes. I recognize you as the boss, okay? Just let me go." Of course, Shikamaru did not believe such nonsense, but he could not hold it for a long time. Chakra was wasted with every twitch, so the technique was more of a mere intimidation. In real combat, she's not much use, especially with Shikamaru's current reserves. And he himself was amused by this ridiculous situation. It was ridiculous to behave so pretentiously, and even in front of children. Dispelling the technique, he looked at the surprised faces of the children and coldly said, "So what? Want to become a ninja? Or will you still associate with these weaklings?" The guys looked at each other, and then someone shouted in agreement, "I want to be a ninja." "And me. Me too." All as one began to pick up and agree. Shikamaru smiled and, not paying attention to the beaten jerks, went up to the children and said, "Then let's go, I'll explain to you how to become a ninja." The children's eyes sparkled, and they completely forgot about their recently beaten friends and followed with a brisk pace after the slowly leaving Shikamaru. Looking at all this, Kji even forgot to scoop up a fresh batch of chips and stared in amazement at his returning friend. When Shikamaru approached, he turned to nearly a dozen children and said gloomily, "This is Kji, they believe some of you already know him." Several of the guys looked down, to which Shikamaru only grinned. "That's good," Shikamaru said gravely, shifting his gaze to Kji. "It's up to you, buddy, I can help you deal with them. It will be very simple. Of course, you can choose another option. Get stronger and make them feel sorry for yourself. They called you fat, right? So turn your calories into strength, isn't that what an Akimichi ninja should do?" As he listened to his friend, Kji's face changed and his fists clenched. He looked at everyone who had called him names in the past and then at Shikamaru. Brother Shikamaru is so strong. If I want to be his friend, then I have to be strong too. So that next time I don't look so weak. Mentally vowing to become stronger, for the first time in his life, a real fighting spirit ignited in this innocent fat man. Taking a serious look at his friend, Kji nodded. "I understood, Shikamaru, I will become stronger." Children are so easy to motivate. "Oh, youth," a 4-year-old child laughed inwardly and looked at his new employees with the face of an adult. "Okay, guys, you'll solve your problems with Kji yourself, my friend is not some weakling for me to stand up for him. Now, if you still haven't changed your mind and are ready to become a ninja, then let's go." With a wave of his hand, Shikamaru, without waiting for a response from the crowd, walked slowly into the dark alley. What he had in mind should not have been done in plain sight, it was only worth hiding a little. Kji smiled and quickly followed his friend. Those who still remained, only looked at each other strangely, and then began to slowly follow. Even those who now felt a slight fear of their peers still wanted to know what would happen next. Will they be able to become ninjas? When everyone passed into an inconspicuous alley, Shikamaru finally stopped and then turned around. Kji stood by his side and turned too. Glancing at the 8 arrivals, Shikamaru nodded contentedly. "Well, it looks like there are no cowards among you." At the first words of Shikamaru, the children even began to smile proudly, but when the next words followed, the smiles instantly disappeared from their faces. "And now, who is not afraid of pain, come forward." They all looked at each other with incomprehension. At first, no one moved, but then, at some point, the eldest of all came out of the crowd. He smiled a little and said confidently, "I'm not afraid of pain, boss." "Oh, and you're a daredevil, I like that." Turning to Kji, Shikamaru said, "Look carefully." The fat man nodded, and Shikamaru slowly walked up to the child a head taller than himself. But although he was older, he did not look very impressive in front of the thin and short Shikamaru. His knees were even slightly shaking. Shikamaru noticed the boy's nervousness and said soothingly, "Don't be afraid, a ninja shouldn't be afraid of pain. Or don't you wanna be a ninja?" "I want." The boy could not resist at once. Shikamaru nodded. "Okay, then stop shaking." After looking around everyone, Shikamaru asked, "You know that a ninja never reveals secrets, even after experiencing pain, right? No amount of torture will break a real ninja, have you heard of that?" "Why yes. Yeah. Have you heard?" All as one began to nod and agree, to which Shikamaru smiled calmly. "Then you should remember well that what we will be doing, no one should know about it, not even your parents. Even those Trinity of Beaten, don't have to find out anything. At the time we met, I already marked you with my shadows, so you should keep your mouth shut." As soon as you tell about what will happen here and about your training, I immediately find out about it and you will be very bad. Is everything clear to you? Many had fear in their eyes and quickly nodded. Okay, I'm giving you one last chance, leave and you can live peacefully without experiencing pain. But if you stay, prepare for a difficult life. Well, who wants to leave? Silence was a good answer, even if they didn't understand what was ahead, it didn't matter. Which of the little naive children could give up the chance to become a ninja? Who among them would have thought that Shikamaru just decided to use them? Even if they blabbed out, Shikamaru could easily avoid problems. Now that they had agreed, it was time to proceed. Well, okay, now. Looking back at the boy in front of him, Shikamaru suddenly moved and his fist landed right in the boy's face. Ah! He screamed and grabbed his broken nose. Shikamaru nodded in satisfaction and said, "Next." Reluctantly, everyone else also passed the pain test. After finishing with them, Shikamaru took the package from Kji and took out several large sheets of thick paper. It was somewhat similar to cardboard, so it was very suitable for the next part of the plan. Taking the ink, Shikamaru wrote out 8 of these sheets and handed them to each. Then, waiting for everyone to stop bleeding, Shikamaru told a brief part of his plan and sent them on a mission. Of course, they only learned what they had to. They did not understand the reason for their beating. But they definitely did not want to repeat such an experience. Although, this action was quite effective. Everything was extremely simple. With punches, he tested their determination, and also showed pain. She could add to their fear of Shikamaru and possibly courage in the future. In the past, this was accepted in his group. Many people are afraid of being beaten, and these are the most unreliable. So Shikamaru wanted to make sure of these guys from the very beginning. We can say that from childhood he taught them to endure pain, which could also help them and add confidence. It may sound stupid, but oddly enough, this method has always worked. Of course, Shikamaru had no special plans for these boys. He was already ready to give them a percentage of the profit. After all, they will work, that will be enough. As for becoming a ninja, experience in such specific money making will come in handy in the future. If any of them follow the ninja path, it may well be useful. The plan was very simple. The boys had to beg for money, sing, dance, do everything to get a Rio. Just asking for money for food is not an option, it can raise questions. So they should just play on the emotions of the crowd and evoke either pity or tenderness. In this way, children were just useful, unlike adults. Of course, questions may arise about the reasons for their actions. It was for this that the plates were needed, on which different stories were written. They should explain everything with the classic excuse about poverty in the family, or the desire to earn extra money for a mother or father for a gift. Some even got a more interesting story, about the desire to raise funds for flowers for the graves of those killed during the attack of the Nine Tails. Since this event was still fresh in people's minds, Shikamaru made sure to take advantage of the painful memories of the population. The scheme is grayish and a bit contemptible, but Shikamaru was not a particular moralist hero. After all, this is the world of the ninja, here children learn to kill quite legally. So this method of earning money seemed not so bad. If no one died in the process, then everything was quite tolerable. Well, if anyone comes out on the trail of Shikamaru, he can easily find an excuse. In style, I taught these kids the severity of the ninja path or did a social experiment. You can come up with a lot of excuses. Having recently examined Konoha, Shikamaru knew for sure that there was plenty of poverty in this village. It's funny, but they weren't even mentioned in the manga. Probably there will be more logic in this world than in the original story. The results of so many warriors, along with the stupor in development, were simply bound to reflect their effects on ordinary people. Of course, there were not so many beggars on the streets, but they were. It was even difficult to imagine what to do in the capitals of countries or cities without Shinobi. The method Shikamaru chose could be more profitable than simply asking for money with a painful and pitying face. Still, using children and people's feelings can be a good option. He himself used a similar method at one time, when childhood was difficult. Although, if he had options, he would have used them. Even he did not like this idea a little. But it's still better than asking for money. This is the only method that has come to his mind at the moment. All the rest demanded either strength, or money, or the weakness of other people. In a village full of Shinobi, a few kids won't be that noticeable. They will be able to disguise themselves and hide from friends and parents, and will give most of the profits to Shikamaru. If everything goes right, then the money will appear very soon. To be on the safe side, Shikamaru wanted to have as little contact as possible with this thug, so he set a meeting place in the same alley where they had just met. In 3 days, there will be a general collection and calculation of funds. So that no one would try to steal and embezzle money, Shikamaru came up with a story about the next shadow technique as an intimidation, and as a motivation he promised to teach the kids ninjutsu. Playing on their knifed and desires should have been a very powerful method. In the worst case, if someone wants to pocket money, it will only play into his hands. There will be quite a good chance to show by example what will happen to those who do not listen to their leader. Although, of course they could have told everything to their parents. But, Shikamaru had foreseen it as well. Knowing the psyche of children, only sissies do this. After hitting them well in the face, Shikamaru had already realized which of them could keep their mouths shut, and who should still be looked at. Usually, street punks are used to not giving up others, even if they are beaten or intimidated. Especially in a situation where the fear of your main thing is much greater. So everything should be fine. Well, if and what happens, he will simply return to excuses or come up with a way to avoid problems. Of course, there were doubts, because this is a different world and people here may be different. Still, his understanding was built on mere mortals, and not on the people of the Shinobi world. But Shikamaru is used to taking risks and betting confidently, and if he has already done something, not regret his choice and accept the consequences. Of course, everything would have been easier if these children were homeless, but unfortunately he did not find such children in Konoha. Probably, here either Danza tried, or they are all in an orphanage. So I had to use simple children. Fortunately, there were no children from special clans among them. As for the 3 recently beaten, Shikamaru had already forgotten about them, and did not attach much importance. There was an option that in the future they would call their older acquaintances, perhaps guys close to the genin level. After interviewing his employees, Shikamaru was convinced that this was very likely. But, he was not particularly worried, in which case he would just have to beat them. By that time, he himself will be many times stronger than himself. 3 days is enough to gain new strength. It's not his style to worry about problems that don't yet exist. Yes, even if he does not become stronger, it is not scary to be beaten, I just did not want to lose authority. So now, when he figured out the money, it was possible to start strengthening. After all, he was already a little late with all this. Everything should be done on time, so after some history study, Shikamaru was ready for his first genome and new bloodline. It was time to sort out the awards and, if there was a chance, to give Kji a special gift. A special and probably more painful gift. Having dispersed the trivialities on their mission, Shikamaru could only grin at their enthusiasm. They did not even suspect that they were just making money on them, and they were not playing a game about ninja. Although they shouldn't know this, these suckers are only a temporary measure. Making money in this way certainly won't work for a long time, and there are some risks that would be undesirable. In any case, for the first time it will be enough, perhaps even to the academy. If strength appears, then a new method of earning money can be found, until the time when he becomes a ninja. Turning to Kji, Shikamaru waved his hand and said, "Let's go." "Where?" Study grinning, Shikamaru put his hands in his pockets and whistled off to the Konoha library. Kji patted his eyes a little, but then went after his friend. The Konoha library was located near the Hokage's residence. It was a small two-story building. Arriving there, Shikamaru immediately began to select books. He wanted to know exactly the history of the Shinobi and to orientate himself in this world in the same way. Understand geography, politics, and all possible threats or vantage points. The Uchiha massacre was about to take place, with about 2 years or so before this event. Shikamaru had no hope of stopping this. Not only was he weak, but his influence was too low. Plus, he probably wouldn't have done anything even if he had the opportunity. Not only was the death of the Uchiha important to the original story, but Shikamaru himself was not opposed to the death of members of this clan. They were undoubtedly very important to Konoha. If he were the Hokage, it would not be just stupid to allow their death, it would be the greatest stupidity. It was stupidity to awaken their nature prone to hatred, isolation and constant mistrust. In this the first and second were masters. Among the Uchiha there were interesting personalities like Sasuke, Itachi, Shisui. But the harm from the Uchiha was much more. The same Obito and Madara will bring a lot of problems to this world. Although it's hard to blame them, all this mess was brewed by their family or friends. The curse of hate was the problem that completely destroyed this clan. Even without this massacre, one day the Uchiha would have met their end. Though, you can say that about all people, with a smile. Reading a book about the founding of the village, Shikamaru thought more about the sage, and not about the Uchiha. Anyway, this old man made this mess. Yes, and Kaguya did her best, but I must admit, she's pretty cute. Suddenly remembering something, Shikamaru cursed inwardly. Shit, I'm still a jerk, what should I do with women? This is bad luck. Maybe I can at least buy cigarettes. In the past, Shikamaru liked to hang out in the company of girls and drinks, relaxing and having fun. But now that he's a child, it won't be possible. Glancing displeasedly at the serious Kji, Shikamaru just grinned wryly and shook his head. It turned out that Kji cannot read. At first Shikamaru wanted to laugh, but then he remembered himself as a child and smiled knowingly. After all, the guy is only 4 years old, what else can you expect from him? In general, now the fat man just looks at the pictures. But, Shikamaru did not intend to leave because of such a trifle. Although the library was small, it was important to gain knowledge. Maybe he knew a lot about the world, he just could forget a lot. Still, human memory is a difficult thing. After spending another 2 hours reading, Shikamaru decided to stop and come back later. He's already delayed with the study and all this nonsense with money. He wanted to go back to training again, and to the Shinobi system. All this daily routine was very tiring. Calling for Kji, the two guys headed to Shikamaru's home. After going further into the Nara forest, they stopped at a small river. Shikamaru used to train here, so he wanted to spend everything in this place. For starters, it was Kji's case. Thinking back to the time he had learned the pill, he knew Kji would be able to handle it before evening. There was a river nearby, so everything was even easier. The stabilization pill will be useless to Shikamaru himself, and it is not clear to whom he cannot give it. So Kji's choice was reasonable. While the friend is dealing with the pill effect, Shikamaru himself will be able to tackle the system without unnecessary distractions. There were many awards that were worth learning, and then the choice of pedigree. Smiling calmly, Shikamaru put his hand into his pocket and then pulled out a small paper package and handed it to his friend. Kji took the package and asked, "What is it?" Shikamaru smiled mysteriously and without answering the question, said, "Kji, although we don't know much, but I want to ask, do you trust me?" Well, yes, of course I do, we are friends." Amazing naivety. Shaking his head with a grin, Shikamaru smiled calmly and said, "This is a bloodline stabilization pill. By taking it, the strength of your bloodline will reach a good indicator." I don't quite understand." Shikamaru sighed. "Then it doesn't matter, just eat it." Shikamaru didn't even have time to finish when Chg dropped the pill and swallowed. Somehow tasteless. Shikamaru blinked and then grinned wryly. "What did I expect?" "Well, now what?" "Oh, it's simple, you will become stronger, and the clan's techniques will be easier for you." Kji smiled happily. "Ha, that's good. But, Shikamaru, where did you get this pill?" "I'll tell you later, but for now, prepare for the pain." From the strange smile of a friend, the fat man began to get nervous and with panic in his voice asked, "Pain? What is the pain? You didn't say thu." Before he could finish, Kji grabbed his stomach and shouted "Aaa." Shikamaru chuckled and quickly gagged each other with a rag. "Don't shout, we don't need curious faces here." Kji looked at Shikamaru in resentment, but then pulled out a rag and growled, "I can handle it myself." Noticing his friend's fighting spirit, Shikamaru just smiled. "Blame brother, life sometimes surprises, so be patient." Shikamaru himself remembered how the process of assimilating the medicine would go. The pain was quite bearable. Kji should definitely do it, because it's not even an elixir of fortification. If he does not master this, then talking about becoming a ninja is meaningless. Well, I hope he doesn't die. It might be a bit ruthless, but Shikamaru was only 90% sure that this pill wouldn't hurt his new friend. Still, he was sure that the system would not harm him, but about others, there were some doubts. So Kji had to dispel them. Plus, he was sorry to waste it on useless people, and Kji could become quite useful. You can call it a cruel experiment on a person, but no one will know. Chuckling at his dark thoughts, Shikamaru decided to get down to business. While his friend was digesting the pill, Shikamaru began planning. He himself was planning a difficult day. After all, pills are just a warm-up. The status hadn't changed at all since last time, so he didn't even look at it. After bringing up the quest bar, Shikamaru took a look at all the recently completed ones. Good compatibility. Reach an affinity with one of the elements 50%. Reward 5,000 points, elixir of enhancing elements, random. Perfect compatibility. Reach affinity with one of the elements 100%. Reward 10,000 points, a pill to cleanse the body from toxins, a grade B technique scroll. Special reward for both quests, 6,500 points, 2 random pills and 1 elixir. The power of bloodline. Raise 1 pedigree, up to 400%. Reward, 10,000 points, bloodline stabilization pill. Special reward, 2,000 points, 3 Akimichi and Kurama clan Haijutsu. Only 3 tasks, in total he received 33,500 points for them. If you add them with the points remaining after all the expenses, then 35,000 points of fate will come out. This figure was very decent, especially when you consider that the pedigree of the same Hyuga is worth 40,000. Now Shikamaru was not really worried about the current glasses, but rather the ones he could get by spending these. Plus, he didn't want to waste them thoughtlessly on useless things. It was necessary to spend them profitably and at the same time buy the necessary pedigrees. If everything goes as it should, he will complete 2 tasks and will be able not only to recoup his purchase, but even get an additional 10,000 points. What will happen in the end? 45,000 points and probably a very strong genome and pedigree. Taking the same lineage of the Kaguya clan, it will allow you to get both a new lineage and a very good genome. Shikamaru liked Taijutsu, so this power was very useful to him. Having spent 20,000, he will acquire 30. Which will eventually turn into 45,000 points. It was at this moment that Shikamaru began to think hard. He had already decided on the Shikatsu-myaku, but it was still a good option for 20,000. Uzumaki's pedigree was seductive, but there was no genome, so he decided to temporarily wait until better times. The question was, what to take after? After earning 45,000, he will put 5 of them aside, for elixirs and pills, and possibly techniques. But here's 40, where to spend them? Take Uzumaki, which will help increase chakra volume, and take Sarutobi, which will also help increase control. Together, both of these bloodlines can help you achieve a lot. Even 5,000 extra points will remain. With 10,000, Shikamaru may well be pumping those bloodlines to an acceptable level. But, he also wanted the Bakugan. The first option could open the way to heaps of chakra and good control, but the second to huge opportunities in Taijutsu and unique dojutsu. In fact, both options were roughly equal. But in the future, the ancestry of Uzumaki and Sarutobi can help healthy. They evolved along with the user, so it was of great help. It was tempting, but Shikamaru knew that he could still get those bloodlines one day. But there was also a catch: the number of tasks was just as important. After receiving his first dojutsu, Shikamaru will be able to perform another one and will receive fate points again. But with the ancestry of Uzumaki and Sarutobi, this would not be possible, which could slow progress. Shikamaru was sure that in a year he would be able to take on the Uzumaki lineage if he received an award for that dojutsu. Without her, it would be very unlikely. Plus, don't underestimate the Hyuga. Based on information about this lineage, they have unique chakra channels. Together with Shikatsu-myaku and the 8 gates, one can truly become a real monster. Well, you should never worry about a heap of chakra, at worst there is a Baiju. Uzumaki was interested in Shikamaru because of his high vitality and talent for Fuinjutsu, and the chakra was secondary. Now, he is able to live without it. As far as control is concerned, Shikamaru already had quite tolerable control from birth. Nevertheless Taijutsu is closer to me. Smiling internally, Shikamaru made his choice. In fact, the options were almost the same, so he decided to pick the one he liked best. Uzumaki's vitality is good, but the toughness of a taijutsu master was closer to him. Having decided on this, he began collecting awards for all tasks. He began with the simplest. The illusory disc icon stirred again in front of Shikamaru's eyes. The numbers on the disc panel began to change quickly, and then the first award was received. 5,000 points, an elixir for enhancing the elements of wind. While Kji could not see, Shikamaru held out his hand and a floating bottle of blue liquid slowly fell into it. It was formed in the same way as the first elixir. After, the time has come for other awards. 10,000 points, a pill to cleanse the body from toxins, a grade B technique scroll. 6,500 points, 2 chakra restoration pill, chakra channel cleansing pill. 10,000 points, pedigree stabilization pill. 2,000 points, 3 Akimichi and Kurama clan Haijutsu. Massaging his temples gently, Shikamaru exhaled heavily. New knowledge of techniques was a little painful, but quite useful. Unfortunately, the received clan Haijutsu could not be used. The Kurama clan technician needs an improved genome, and the Akimichi technician needs a special clan skill. It can of course be developed, but with Shikamaru's current yang compatibility, it won't be possible. Although, the number of points was pleasing, which gave Shikamaru a wry grin. After collecting all the pills and elixirs, the guy put everything in his pocket and turned to Kji. Here I have just finished digesting the stabilization pill. Approaching his friend, Shikamaru patted him on the shoulder and asked, "Well, how? Do you feel anything?" Kji lifted his sweat-covered face and pushed his wet hair out of his eye, replied in displeasure. "Shikamaru, you didn't say it would hurt that much." But his friend's muttering, Shikamaru just chuckled. "Well, how did you want? Pain is progress. Although, sometimes." Smiling, Shikamaru took a pill from his white pocket and instantly put it in his mouth. "Eh? What is it?" When asked by Kji, Shikamaru just sat down opposite him and said, "Some kind of medicine, by the way, you remember our agreement?" Kji scratched his head thoughtfully, then nodded. "Ah, yeah, don't tell anyone about the pills and our training, not even our parents." "That's good." With a short nod, Shikamaru smiled. "Go while you wash, I'll need your help soon." Looking at the calm expression on his friend's face, Kji shook his head slightly and walked slowly towards the river. His condition was not very good after digesting the pill, maybe because of his weight, or because of his unstable body, but he was sweating more than in the case of Shikamaru. But all this could be attributed to the elixir of strengthening, which he took at the very beginning. So CHG Shikamaru did not notice any deviations, the experience seemed to be successful. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel. Also make sure you tell me your recommendation in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching.